Meeting to order of the Newtown Township Finance Committee, February 19th, 2025. We'll do a roll call. Rich Johnson. Here. Scott, I'm sorry. I always do this. Broder, that's right. I'm sorry. I'm on blank today. Larry, I can't even remember. Fisher is here. Lisa Pascal is not here. Ed Naples is here. We'll stand for a moment of silence.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry for me drawing having a senior moment there at the beginning.
Yeah, been there.
If it's only a moment.
Well, if you ask my wife. Don't wake them up. Next order on the agenda is any public comment for the agenda items. I see no public representation. We'll move on to the next order, and that will be to consider approving the minutes for this meeting. January 15th, 2025 minutes. Hopefully, folks.
Let's back up and do the approval of the agenda first.
Ooh, I apologize. I jumped. Boy, I'm really off today. We need to have a motion to consider approval for the this meeting's agenda.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Passes. That motion was made by Larry Fisher and approved by Scott Trotter. Now we move on to the minutes from the January 15th, 2025 meeting. Well, those should have been attached to the email release that came from Maura. Are there any motions to consider changes to the minutes?
I'll move to accept them as written.
All in, excuse me, I'll second. Ed Naples will second. Larry Fisher made the motion. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Motion passes. Steve, finally you, so I don't have to consider to do brainwave. Oh, Tom, welcome, Tom. Take that ball.
There we go. Okay. Just want to give a brief overview of some of the highlights of the first month of the year. First and foremost, we have real estate, as you probably know, real estate taxes just recently went out at the beginning of the month, and that's our biggest, well over $7.2 million projected in that category. So we're anticipating that fun stuff to start coming in the next 30 to 60 days. But however, we have had some progress regarding real estate taxes. We have a lot of activity, a lot of tax transfers, real estate tax transfers. So we've had over $100,000 in the month of January collected on transfers that occurred in the last month of 2024.
Tom, were those, if I could stop you, were those
Sure.
parcels, were they commercial parcels, large parcels? Could you describe a little bit more?
Yeah.
What I'm getting at is
Right.
whether or not it's just an acceleration of what normally would come in, or is it something out of the ordinary?
Well, slightly the volume was residential, to answer your question, majority of residential.
Okay.
Yes, and there was 3 properties that were sizable in assessed values that went obviously appreciation being what it is.
Yeah.
You acquire, and then so we got the benefit of that. We've projected in our budget, our final budget was adopted. We increased that real estate transfer tax projection for this year by $50,000, anticipating we get a Maria is good and the county's good, giving me a pre-update as far as where things are gonna be. They're also good at giving me reassessments. Okay, so we've got a good feeling that we're going to get probably close to half of that in February, just because of the assessed values of certain things. And the increase in value is going to do a bump into the interim tax bills that pop up. So it's all pointing up in our largest bucket, which is a positive, being 31 days into 2025. Along those lines, we also had, and I'm just grouping things in certain categories, project permits and escrow deposits related to that have also exceeded in January $100,000. And that is earmarked for 2 large projects that are under consideration. And they're both going to occur in 2025. We just don't know the actual timing because they're conditional uses and items like that. So usually we have our engineering costs and our professional services attorneys looking at certain things too, in addition to that. So that started to trickle in as well. So we're actually on a nice timeline from that respect. So projecting wise, while we were very conservative from a budget standpoint after what has happened in prior years from development standpoint and the revenues we generated from that, this was not a nice surprise. It was also anticipated, but I didn't anticipate that much, 2 things coming in at one time. So that's a substantial thing. Other than that, we received our normal quarterly franchise tax fees, $85,000 from Verizon and Comcast, as we anticipated. In addition, we budgeted nice enough to budget part of our largest capital purchase was the fire truck. Okay, and we were able to at this time, $1.4 million was the cost that we were looking to. So right now we're somewhere in the area of about $1.240 million. So
Has that order been actually placed or is in?
that
final
order has already been paid
negotiation?
for. What we've done is because we're using Delaware Valley Regional Financing Authority, we in the IRS were able to we call it reimbursement financing. So we actually were able to get a 5% discount on a big number, which was in excess of $50,000 of savings. So we're able to do that. IRS provision allows you to come back in and get not refinancing, reimbursement financing.
Which is what?
Which is we're borrowing up to $1.240 million. Probably going to borrow more closer to $1 million. Okay, the cost is $1.240 million. We're going to $1 million is our target of what we're going to borrow, and that's what we anticipated. And I have a call today to find out where the rate is going to stop at, but it's
SOFR plus.
So,
Yes.
think about it this way. We went ahead and wrote the check out of our funds
Okay.
today.
I thought you.
It's so that we could pay for the truck up front,
Okay.
so that we could get the discount.
Okay.
And then we're gonna go back and borrow the money and reimburse ourselves to do that. So it was using some of our savings that we really didn't have to go buy the truck just to pay cash for it. But we used some of our savings to pay for it up front so that we could reimburse ourselves within the next 60 days or so. And the idea being that we were able to get the $50,000 savings, which will help pay the interest on the truck.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
but, we would have normally had to wait until we could get the money and then pay, but we just reimbursed ourselves. That's really what
So
it
how
is.
long will that loan be?
The loan will be, I
10 years.
think we're looking at 5 years. 5 years?
10.
Oh, 10 years.
10 years.
10 years, I'm sorry, 10 years.
10 years
10 years.
on a
It's about $100,000 payment every year, a little over.
yeah, it comes pretty much flat because the interest rate is so severely competitive from that respect. So that's positive from the standpoint of the borrowings where it is, the cost is actually, we committed to some savings because we have the availability to do that. And the IRS provision, just to finish that, close that loop, is you have 60 days from the time that you signed the resolution and was executed at the last Board of Supervisors meeting. And the lender has it, and they've got the applications and the financing packages and everything. So looking positive all around, and we've got more than enough time to close
Work
on
it
the
out,
financing and
right.
get going. And as Steve made reference, the savings will help us pay
Right,
a nice chunk of the first year.
right.
So it's positive all around. In addition, we've got, recently we had a grant meeting with our engineers, just to go through a few things, because the timing of some of the grants, sometimes you have to apply for extensions just to be able to meet the funds, be able to meet the actual completion, because like anything else, you have, when you have engineering costs, then you have engineering functions that need to be done and stuff like that. And there are a variety of sidewalk extensions, rear park redevelopment there, from stormwater standpoint. And there's about, currently we've got, and we do this, we got about over $1.5 million of grants coming through the door. Okay, within the next, we'll go until,
Are those state or federal?
they're all state.
Okay.
Some of the state grants are actually federal dollars, though.
Yeah.
So,
All right, so there's a backdoor risk there.
yeah,
Yeah. And then the other side of it is
Any concern that some of those, because I've read, quite a few articles about, some of these grants from the federal government ain't coming down to the county anymore. So,
Yeah.
sure that's gonna,
yeah, I'm not so worried about what we've already been awarded. I'm much more, I think it'll be less likely that we'll get some of the dollars going forward. But I'm not so worried about
what's all right.
what we've
Right.
already had awarded, because those dollars were set aside in prior appropriation years. And so, and I believe the state already has them. It's money that the state got from the federal government, and it's not a lot, but there's a couple that were federal government ones as well.
And we've had dialogue with the representatives from DCED regarding one, we needed an extension of time just to get it completed. I've met every criteria we needed to from the engineering report, providing the case, our financial requirement, meeting the case. So basically, we got approved of that, just to extend it for another 12 months just to get that done. Our
Yeah.
funds are still there. A lot of, and what Steve has made a policy here, a lot of these grants are reimbursable situations. So if for some reason something got minimized or taken out, we ask for it after the fact kind of situation. So it's not like we ever have to, we'd hate to try to, you don't meet, say you got a $350,000 and you only do $300,000, you gotta get $50,000 back if you took it off. We're not,
Okay.
we don't practice that here. We have the availability to do it that way. And a lot of municipalities, unfortunately, and I've
Yeah.
been involved in, haven't had that opportunity. And, you're finding out, or for closeout, you might find some cost that may not be eligible.
Eligible, right.
And then you find, so we don't, because Steve has set the precedent, we don't make that a opportunity. We don't advance the money and then find, go through the process of that side of it. So all in all, it was a great first month. Feeling very positive about everything.
Good.
Does that,
Any-
does that
questions?
loan have does it have a prepayment penalty? And that's one question too. Well, is it a SOFR plus 1, 2, what, on that?
The term?
Okay. It does not have a prepayment penalty. Okay. However, there are, well, we would not do it. The cost of they're talking, the range is like 4 to 5%, that range, give you an idea, as that's where it is.
That's,
Okay.
that's good.
Yes, yeah, it's not, we've had success here with that using Del Val. I've used Del Val other places, and I've dealt with, and now I'm dealing with Jeff Calhoun. I used to deal with his father Lucian for years, and he still, see him copied on things still, so, you know. So when they ask for stuff, I start, we start the first 2 minutes is like, hey, Ben, how old's your son now? I was like, something like that. So you kind of get to, it's a comforting feeling, and I know they're very successful at what they did.
You've built up the trust.
What's that?
Yeah, so there's typically not a prepayment penalty, but usually the rates are so low. They're a little bit higher now. I mean, I think our last fire truck that we're still paying on was like 0.7%. I mean, like, so we've really gotten pretty good deals from them. And so it's almost hard to make a decision to, like, why would you repay early on that kind of percentage? And so I can't imagine that we'll do much with it over that time. There's the way you get those, sometimes it's not a penalty, but because sometimes it's funded through a swap, you have to be careful. And so, but most of these, we know what we need to do before we go in. And the risk is pretty low over a 10-year period. I wouldn't do it for a 20 or 30 year, but it's okay for what we're doing 10 year.
We don't have like 3 more trucks due in 2 years.
Well, and we have another engine that is going to need to come up in probably about 5 years, I think it is. My goal eventually would be that we would be setting aside enough money in the budget that it would just become like a automatic car payment that you just always have, even hopefully to ourselves eventually. So you're not paying the interest rate. And then we would just buy those trucks cash, but those are big investments. So it's a little bit harder to get to on than some of them, but we've been working on that for several years with a variety of things to try to be able to make payments to ourselves roughly about what it would cost us to replace the vehicles on a yearly basis.
What do we do with the old truck?
The old truck's not ours. The old truck actually belongs to the fire company. The difference is that, I guess it was about 3.5, 4 years ago, we made the decision to start purchasing the trucks. So the township is responsible for fire service. It's one of the things that it's actually in the second-class township code that we're responsible for. And in the past, we've always allowed the volunteer fire company to buy their own vehicles, do their own thing. They were starting to struggle and able to do that. They were having a hard time getting enough people to raise money plus fight fires. And we said, if you focus on keeping people in fire and being able to fight fires, we'll start buying the equipment. And the idea being that 2 things. One is if the volunteer fire company ever folds, all I have to do is go pick up the 2 trucks. I can park them at the Public Works building, and all I need to do is go hire firefighters, and I can still put trucks out to fires. So that was part of the thought process. The other part was, if they're not having to raise money for fire trucks and they're able to focus on, their training, and they're able to focus on, just their personal equipment, we win as a township. I can tell you, as long as we have volunteers doing firefighting for us in the town, it is substantially cheaper for the township. Just to give you an idea, we spend about $4.5 million on the police department. The fire department would be at least that amount of money. The biggest difference is their toys are just more expensive, Police cars are pretty cheap compared to fire trucks. And so, so we've already started that role in taking on the big equipment. And so by doing so, I think we benefit, and that, the fire company benefits. They've got a pretty big mortgage on their building that they put in, and so they're focused on that. And if we can keep the equipment in the building, then we're both better off.
Steve, that's an interesting point. I'm presuming the fire company as an entity owns the building and the parcel where the firehouse sits,
Yes,
not the township.
the township does not own the building or the parcel.
Okay.
No.
Any other questions? I have 2.
Yeah.
First one, I think is pretty easy. I'm aware there are a couple of vacant parcels that the township owns in the township, like where I live in Green Country, there's the two on 252 between Aspen and Sawmill.
Yes.
Has consideration been given in the past as to whether or not there are any value? Would it be something that the township would consider selling?
Yeah, so we actually bought the one on the corner of Sawmill
Right.
within the last 10 years, probably the last 7 years. We bought it from the fire company. Who had bought it because they were originally
Right.
going to put the
The
fire
whole
company
controversy,
there. There
right.
was a lot of controversy. So we bought it from them. The land that's next to it, that's next to Aspen,
Right.
was part of the development given to the township. It has a lot of restrictions on it and how it can be used, what it can be done with. I don't think we could ever sell it
Right.
because it has
With
like
nominal value.
it has nominal value because of the restrictions. We actually are, one of the grants that we have that's been awarded is a grant that will allow us to come in and do some stormwater management. If you
Yes.
come out Sawmill regularly,
Well
you
aware.
know, in a heavy rain, we end up with a lot of challenges
Yeah.
there. And so we have a grant that we're going to clean up that area. We're actually going to widen the mouth of
Yeah.
Sawmill, that entrance there,
Yeah.
some, because if you know, it narrows
Yeah,
pretty
it's a
tightly.
bottleneck. Yeah.
And so we want to widen that. We want to do some stormwater in there. And we'll be using the property to send the water through over to the one closer to Aspen. Eventually, we want to do a small park there at the corner of Sawmill. So that property, no, I don't think there's many properties we intend to sell. We own several that if we could figure out what they had some worth, we'd probably sell them.
Well, that was
But that's one that we see as a benefit to the township.
Yeah.
We see as a need for a small park there, you know, probably passive kind of thing. But that would be a nice little spot.
I was also thinking about, Steve, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. We have the Meadow Preserve
Yeah.
between Lissiter and Episcopal. And that's, I think, 75 acres.
50.
Oh, it's 50 acres. Okay, I'm sorry. Has any consideration or thought been given to any further subdivision of that could be developed that the township could sell?
No. So it's got high restrictions upon it, what it can be done with. It can only be open space.
Oh, okay.
So several of our properties that we own are very, very limited in what they can be done. And that's one of them. When that was given to us, as part of it, it was given to us as public land, but it was given, I mean, we've had a whole issue of whether we can even put a structure on it, like a gazebo we wanted to put a learning center, and some people have actually challenged whether we can even do that. I think we can do it based on how we would use it. But it's very limited in how that piece of parcel could be used. Which is the case on many of our lands.
Okay.
We have very restricted how that could be used. And we want, you know, we have a high value in this community on green space.
Right.
And so, you know, there's a lot of pressure for us to keep green space. And so I just really, I don't know of any piece of property that we own
That would be readily
That would-
marketable,
that
that
would be marketable, that we
Yeah.
wouldn't, that people wouldn't say
Wouldn't
we
get a
would rather
conflict.
it be
Why'd you do
green
that?
space.
Yeah.
got it. Last question. I recall in conjunction with the countywide reassessment
Mhm.
a couple of years back, obviously there were folks that were happy with the revaluation, and then there were folks that weren't happy and then came in and appealed. And there was a flurry of appeals and adjustments. Has that whole phenomenon kind of tapered down? Where I'm going with my question is whether or not you still expect to see fluctuations, quote, decreases in the tax that's going to be generated as a result of the final resolution of those appeals, or is that kind of already filtered out?
So the filtering out, the appeals that were done related to the actual reassessment back in 2019 and came into effect in 2021, 2021. That pretty much has settled out. What we're now experiencing is the common area ratio appeal, which is basically looks at the value of the property compared to other properties around how they've gone up in market value. And that appeal is hot and heavy. To be honest with you, I have received a couple mailers personally of attorneys that would be more than happy for me to appeal my assessment and believe that they could save me substantial dollars in doing so. So that's still going, and I think that's pretty strong. That's probably going to continue, I would think, for the next couple of years as people continue to take advantage of that, which actually is a bigger hit than the appeal that we
Countywide.
experienced when the county assessment has been done. We're experiencing more of a decrease on that.
So I'm presuming then, Steve, you factored into the projections that you're gonna have some leakage there as a result of the outcome of those appeals.
Yeah, the good news for us compared to some of the other areas, I just cut back on what we expected to see the increase to be,
Okay,
because we knew we're still getting, as Tom mentioned, the interims off of the Ellis Preserve. And so we just kind of tapered those down a little bit, what we thought we would get. And then we kind of tapered those back, knowing that we would probably have some of these appeals coming in. It's hard to know, I mean, the other thing that's happening is office space is being left vacant still pretty long, even though there's a big push for
Yeah,
people to
Campus
go back to
Boulevard,
work. If you look at Campus Boulevard,
Yeah.
there's still significant space. If you look at some of the other places, there's still significant space, of offices that are not being used. Those folks are going in and asking for appeals based on their assessment of market,
Yeah.
what their market
Sure.
value
Empty
is.
commercial space.
And so that's being hitting us as well. And so, I think we're going to be a little bit more flat than what we would have liked to have been based on what we had gotten out of the other.
Anything else, anybody? New business, I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on new business topics. I see none. Old business, I know Lisa's not here. I don't know whether or not Lisa and Scott were able to put their heads together any further on our project on information. I don't know what the status is.
We
of that.
did meet with both Lisa and Scott. Scott is here, obviously he can talk to it, but we met with them, what was it, about a month ago, Scott? Maybe more
two.
than that, maybe
more
two.
than that,
Yeah. We're still trying to get some things caught up on the finance
Yeah,
side.
I know it's just always a busy time, right? Especially now.
So we need to get them some reports.
Okay,
And we want to get some things finalized for 2024 before we do.
okay.
And I'm
It's good.
hoping
Lisa wasn't here, so I was thinking I could stick more on her.
Yeah, so you stick more on her, yeah, please do. But we want to finalize some things. I think
Okay.
that's probably going to be another month before we get everything finalized for 2024. And so once we get all that done, then we can really start giving the trends over the last 10
Right.
years.
Right.
Because that's what we were going to look at,
That's
that
right.
last 10-year period.
Yeah, the big three.
We're now 10 years in the software. And so
Oh,
that
so
we
you're-
have,
Yeah,
so
you're
we
not,
now
you're
actually
not thinking
have,
back. Yeah,
we now actually have something that we can look back at
and it's reliable.
and it's fairly reliable, yeah, because we've kept the same account structure
Yeah.
for that period of time. For those who don't know, when I came 10 years ago, probably the first year I was here, one of the first things we did was we changed all of the account structure and tied it back to the state reporting. For whatever reason, the township had not used the state reporting structure, which I think made it harder they kind of did, but they didn't tie it real closely to it. So we went back, we tied it real closely to it. We added an ability to do category reporting, which we didn't have before. And so We did that, and now we have that 10-year window that we can look back over because it's been 10 years. Hard to imagine. That's where we are.
Time flies.
Time does fly. It
Yeah, yeah.
feels like almost yesterday that I started here, and yet in other ways, it feels like I've always been here, so.
Depends on what day it is.
Most of the time, it feels like just yesterday.
Other questions or comments? I see none. I see no public representation for public comment. Otherwise, I think we're good. Our next meeting is March 19th. I will not be in attendance, so I will make sure Lisa, as our vice chair, is here. Be in the Caribbean. With that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 8:35. Thanks, everybody.